The toxic dawn broke over Reclamation Zone 9, casting a sickly green light across mountains of discarded technology that stretched beyond the horizon. Maya Rodriguez moved like a ghost between towering heaps of electronic waste, her environmental suit's filters working overtime to keep the poisonous particulates at bay. At 27, she was already a veteran of the most dangerous profession on a dying planet, urban mining. Survival in 2089 meant becoming intimate with humanity's greatest failure: generations of unchecked consumption and environmental destruction. The world had long since passed the point of no return. Climate catastrophe, resource depletion, and technological obsolescence had transformed most of Earth's major urban centers into vast wastelands of garbage. But where others saw only waste, Maya saw potential. Her current target was a particularly treacherous pile of industrial refuse, a mountain of broken quantum processors, shattered fusion cell components, and genetic research equipment that had been abandoned when the last tech megacore collapsed. Each step was a calculated risk. The pile could shift at any moment, burying her beneath tons of toxic waste. The automated waste processing drone overhead began to malfunction. Its massive compactor arms started to spin erratically, hydraulic systems whining with mechanical distress. Maya realized too late that she was directly in its path. The drone's sensors had locked onto her, mistaking her for another piece of recyclable material. "Shit," she screamed, diving between two massive stacks of crushed server banks. The compactor crashed down, sending shockwaves through the unstable waste mountain. Debris rained around her, a metallic thunderstorm of technological corpses. Maya's hand closed around a strange device, an experimental molecular reconfiguration prototype she'd salvaged weeks ago from an abandoned research facility. In that moment of pure survival instinct, she activated the device. The effect was instantaneous and impossible. The broken technological components around her began to shift, their molecular structures breaking down and reforming with impossible speed. Quantum processors melted and restructured. Fusion cell remnants liquefied and reconstituted. What should have been random technological waste began to form coherent, structured patterns. Maya watched in absolute shock as the device in her hand hummed with an energy that defied everything she understood about material science. It wasn't just sorting or recycling. It was fundamentally transforming matter at its most basic level. When the dust settled, she found herself surrounded by perfectly structured molecular matrices. Fragments of different technologies had merged into something entirely new. The device had done more than save her life. It had revealed a technological miracle. Her comm unit crackled to life. "Rodriguez, we need that salvage report," came the monotone voice of her supervisor. But Maya wasn't listening. Her mind was racing with possibilities. This wasn't just a breakthrough. This was the potential salvation of a species on the brink of total environmental collapse. The device in her hand felt warm, almost alive. Microscopic nanites danced across its surface, a silent promise of technological resurrection. Maya knew, with a certainty that burned through her very being, that she had just discovered something that could change everything. Humanity had spent generations treating the planet like a disposable resource. Now, she had found a way to make resources out of the very things they had discarded. As the toxic sun continued to rise over Reclamation Zone 9, Maya Rodriguez began to laugh. It was a sound of hope, of defiance, of absolute scientific triumph. The world had written humanity off as a failed species, but they were about to prove everyone wrong. Captain Zaxtor of the Varaxian Collective's exploratory fleet leaned back in his crystalline command chair, 6 eyes blinking in perfect synchronization as the holographic display of Earth flickered before him. The planet was a mess, a chaotic blue-green sphere wrapped in layers of atmospheric pollution and orbital debris. To the Varaxians, it looked like nothing more than a failed experiment in planetary management. "Prepare initial contact protocols," Zaxtor commanded, his translator rendering the words in perfect human English. Standard pre-contact assessment. The ship's communication officer, a young Varaxian named Krell, began scanning Earth's communication networks. What they found was both fascinating and pathetic. Humanity seemed to be a species in terminal decline, fighting over dwindling resources, struggling with environmental catastrophe. Their technological progress seemingly stalled. But then something caught Krell's attention. A transmission from a place called Reclamation Zone 9. A scientific presentation that was either the most brilliant or the most absurd thing the Varaxians had ever encountered. A human named Maya Rodriguez was demonstrating a technology that could fundamentally restructure waste at the molecular level. Zaxtor watched the transmission with a mixture of scientific curiosity and barely contained derision. The human moved between mountains of technological garbage, holding what appeared to be a simple device. Her presentation claimed she could transform discarded technology into perfectly structured molecular matrices. This is what passes for science on this planet. Zaxtor's primary neural cluster pulsed with dismissive energy. They can't even manage their own waste disposal, and now they claim to revolutionize material science. The Varaxian delegation prepared their response. It would be a diplomatic communication filled with the kind of condescending pity that their species had perfected over millennia of galactic exploration. They had seen hundreds of developing civilizations. This one seemed no different. A species on the brink of self-destruction, grasping at impossible technological straws. Little did they know that Maya Rodriguez was about to prove them spectacularly wrong. As the Varaxian scout ship entered Earth's orbit, Zaxtor couldn't help but chuckle. Humans and their desperate attempts to survive. It was almost endearing. Almost. The first official communication was prepared. A message that would become legendary in galactic diplomatic circles, a transmission that perfectly captured the Varaxians' complete misunderstanding of human potential. Greetings, Earth civilization. Zaxtor dictated, his translator rendering each word with clinical precision. We observe your current technological state and offer our condolences. Perhaps we can assist in your species' eventual managed decline. In the transmission room, no one noticed the microscopic nanites that had already begun to infiltrate the ship's communication systems, the first hint of the technological revolution that was about to unfold. Humanity's response was coming, and it would be nothing like anyone expected. The Global Resource Recovery Committee chamber was a monument to human desperation. Sterile white walls surrounded a circular conference table where the last remnants of Earth's scientific and political leadership gathered. Maya Rodriguez stood at the center, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to demonstrate the technology that could either save humanity or seal its doom. Funding was her last hope. The committee had given her 6 months and a microscopic budget to prove that her molecular reconfiguration technology could be more than a laboratory curiosity. 6 months to transform humanity's mountain of waste into something revolutionary. The prototype Starship module sat on the holographic display, a seemingly impossible construct of recycled materials. Every component had been sourced from what others considered worthless. Defunct quantum processors, shattered fusion cell remnants, abandoned aerospace components. To the untrained eye, it looked like a piece of technological garbage hastily cobbled together. Dr. Elena Reyes, the committee's chief scientific advisor, watched with skeptical eyes. Rodriguez, she interrupted, this looks like something salvaged from a junkyard, not a potential spacecraft component. Maya took a deep breath. Years of research, countless sleepless nights, and the hopes of an entire struggling species rested on this moment. The molecular reconfiguration device, her salvation, hummed softly in her hand, its nanite networks already beginning to interface with the prototype module. The demonstration began. Initial readings were chaotic. The module's structural integrity fluctuated wildly. Stress tests showed impossible variations. One moment the material seemed brittle, the next stronger than any known alloy. The committee members exchanged worried glances. This looked like it was about to become another failed experiment. Then everything changed. As the stress tests intensified, the module began to react in ways no one expected. Microscopic nanites within the material started to redistribute, restructuring the molecular bonds in real time. Cracks that appeared instantly sealed, weak points transformed into areas of incredible strength. The module wasn't just resisting destruction, it was actively adapting. Dr. Reyes leaned forward, her skepticism transforming into something between shock and scientific excitement. "This is impossible," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. The final test pushed the module to its absolute limit. A simulation of extreme space conditions, radiation, temperature variations, micrometeorite impacts, was initiated. Any normal material would have shattered. Instead, the prototype began to do something extraordinary. It was learning. The nanite network within the module was creating new molecular configurations in real time, adapting to each simulated challenge faster than any computer could process. What should have been a catastrophic failure became a masterpiece of technological innovation. When the simulation ended, the module looked different. Not damaged, not repaired, transformed. It had literally redesigned itself during the test, incorporating lessons from each simulated challenge. Absolute silence filled the chamber. Maya Rodriguez stood perfectly still, the molecular reconfiguration device still active in her hand. Her eyes reflected a mixture of triumph and terror. She had just shown the committee something beyond their wildest imagination, a technology that could turn humanity's greatest weakness into its ultimate strength. Dr. Reyes was the first to speak. How? How is this possible? "We've been looking at waste all wrong," Maya responded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "It's not an end product. It's a beginning." The Varaxian scout ship orbiting Earth received the transmission of the test results. Captain Zaxtor watched the recording, his 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. For the first time, something that felt remarkably like fear began to creep into his consciousness. Humanity was not done. Not even close. Outside the committee chamber, the mountains of technological waste that had been humanity's shame began to look less like a graveyard of civilization and more like a blueprint for survival. The impossible prototype was just the beginning. The first signs of the Void Devourers came as a whisper in the galactic void, a silence more terrifying than any sound. Astronomical observatories across multiple star systems began detecting impossible gaps in space. Entire planetary systems were vanishing, not destroyed, but simply erased, as if they had never existed. The Varaxian Collective was the first to truly comprehend the magnitude of the threat. Their most advanced long-range sensors showed something that defied all known laws of physics. The Void Devourers didn't just destroy civilizations, they consumed them completely, leaving nothing but a mathematical void where entire star systems once existed. Captain Zaxtor's flagship, the Crystalline Sentinel, trembled as it received the first direct transmission from a frontier research outpost. The message was fragmented, terrifyingly brief. "They are not Medashienes. They are not organic. They seod anasuami." Then silence. The Varaxian military complex, a technological marvel that had stood undefeated for millennia, began to crumble. Their most advanced warships, vessels that could destroy entire planets with a single energy pulse, were being systematically eliminated. The Void Devourers didn't fight, they simply existed, and in their existence, they unmade everything they touched. On Earth, Maya Rodriguez was the first to receive the classified transmission. The Global Defense Council had been monitoring the extraterrestrial communications, and they needed her molecular reconfiguration technology more desperately than ever. "We're facing an extinction-level threat," Admiral Carlos Mendez explained, his weathered face projected on the holographic display. "The Varaxians are sending what remains of their fleet. They want our help." The irony was not lost on Maya. A species that had once looked down on humanity was now begging for salvation. The Void Devourers defied all known classifications of life or technology. They moved through space like a mathematical concept made real, consuming matter, energy, and even the fundamental fabric of space-time. No known weapon could stop them. No shield could resist them. Initial encounters showed their terrifying capabilities. A Varaxian battle group of 50 advanced warships engaged a single Void Devourer manifestation. Within moments, the entire fleet was simply gone, not destroyed, not transformed, simply erased from existence. Maya's research took on a new urgency. The molecular reconfiguration technology was no longer just a solution to Earth's waste problem. It was potentially the only defense against a threat that was consuming the galaxy. They don't just destroy, Maya explained to the Defense Council, her fingers dancing across holographic displays showing the Void Devourer's progression. They unmake. They consume the fundamental structure of reality itself. The molecular reconfiguration device she had discovered in the waste mountains of Reclamation Zone 9 now seemed like something more than a scientific breakthrough. It was becoming humanity's last hope. Varaxian diplomatic ships began arriving in Earth's orbit. Captain Zaxtor himself transmitted a request for direct communication. The previous condescension was gone, replaced by something that sounded remarkably like fear. Humanity, the transmission began. We require your assistance. Those 6 words represented the most significant moment in galactic diplomatic history. A technologically superior civilization was asking a species they had previously considered little more than cosmic garbage collectors for help. Maya Rodriguez stood in the Global Defense Command Center, the molecular reconfiguration device pulsing with an energy that seemed to hint at possibilities beyond current understanding. The device that had saved her life in the Waste Mountains was now humanity's best weapon against a threat that was consuming the galaxy. The Void Devourers were coming, and humanity was about to show the universe what they could do with the things everyone else had given up on. Zaxtor's final transmission captured the desperation of an entire civilization. We were wrong about you, humans. Prove us right now. The transformation of Earth began overnight. What had once been endless landfills, orbital debris fields, and abandoned industrial complexes became the most important shipyards in galactic history. Humanity's greatest environmental failure was about to become its ultimate salvation. Maya Rodriguez stood at the center of a massive reclamation facility that sprawled across what was once the most polluted region of the Pacific Northwest. Massive molecular reconfiguration arrays towered like technological cathedrals, consuming mountains of waste and breathing out the components of starships. We're not just building ships, Maya told the assembled team of engineers, waste workers, and former salvage experts. We're creating living technological organisms. The first ships defied every conventional understanding of spacecraft design. They were organic, chaotic, beautiful in their impossible complexity. Where traditional spacecraft were precision-engineered machines, these vessels looked like something grown rather than built. Quantum processors salvaged from decades-old computer banks became neural networks. Defunct satellite components transformed into adaptive hull structures. Fusion cell remnants powered systems that could regenerate and reconfigure in milliseconds. Global production had been completely redirected. Every resource, every piece of discarded technology became part of the war effort. Unemployed workers from dying industries found themselves on the front lines of humanity's most important project. Waste management became a military-level strategic operation. George Ramirez, a former landfill worker who had spent 20 years moving humanity's discarded trash, now operated the most advanced molecular reconfiguration array in the facility. Who would have thought, he muttered to himself, that all this garbage would save us? The Varaxian observers watched in stunned silence. Their most advanced shipyards took years to produce a single warship. Humanity was producing entire fleets in weeks, using nothing more than the technological refuse they had accumulated over generations. Each ship was unique. No two were exactly alike. They carried the genetic memory of the technologies that birthed them. A quantum processor from an abandoned research facility might inform the ship's decision-making. A fragment of a communication satellite could become an advanced sensor array. The ships were more than machines. They were living records of human technological history. Captain Zaxtor's scientific team analyzed the designs. They're not constructing ships. One Voraxian researcher reported, "They're cultivating them." The first test flights revealed capabilities that defied all known technological limitations. A ship damaged during a simulation would begin to repair itself, drawing materials from its own structure, reshaping and adapting. Where a traditional spacecraft would require weeks of repair, these ships could heal themselves in minutes. Maya's team had discovered something profound. Waste was not an end state. It was a beginning. The global effort united humanity in a way nothing ever had before. Countries that had been enemies now worked side by side. The mountains of technological garbage that had been humanity's greatest environmental shame were now its most valuable resource. Orbital construction platforms that had been dormant for decades roared back to life. Abandoned shipyards became centers of frenetic activity. Every piece of discarded technology became a potential weapon against the void devourers. "We're not just building a fleet," Maya told Admiral Mendez during a strategic briefing. "We're creating a living technological ecosystem." The ships began to show signs of something more than programmed behavior. They communicated with each other in ways no one fully understood. A ship damaged in one test would share its experience with others, allowing the entire fleet to learn and adapt. As the first complete fleet took shape, the Voraxian observers realized something terrifying. Humanity wasn't just preparing for war. They were evolving a new form of technological life. The trash armada was ready, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first indication that something extraordinary was happening came during a routine systems test. Dr. Elena Reyes watched in disbelief as a damaged prototype ship began to reconstruct itself in ways that defied all known principles of engineering and physics. What had started as a molecular reconfiguration technology had evolved into something far more profound. The ships were no longer simply machines. They were living, thinking entities that could adapt, learn, and grow in real time. Maya Rodriguez stood in the central observation deck, her hands pressed against the reinforced glass as she watched the ships communicate. It wasn't radio transmission or any form of electronic signaling. It was something deeper, more fundamental. The ships were sharing information at the molecular level, their nanite networks creating a collective consciousness that spread like a living neural network. "They're talking to each other," Maya whispered, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and existential wonder. "Not just communicating. They're thinking together." The Voraxian scientific team, led by Chief Researcher Krell, struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. Their most advanced artificial intelligence systems looked primitive compared to the emergent intelligence of these trash-built vessels. During one particularly intense simulation, a ship critically damaged in a mock combat scenario began to do something impossible. Instead of simply attempting to repair itself, it began to pull molecular structures from nearby ships, creating a hybrid design that was perfectly adapted to the specific challenges of the simulation. Captain Zaxtor watched the footage repeatedly, his 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. "This is not technology," he told his senior officers. "This is evolution in its purest form." The ships were developing capabilities that went far beyond their original design. A vessel constructed from the remnants of an old telecommunications satellite and a defunct quantum computer developed predictive capabilities that made traditional navigation systems look like children's toys. Another, built from medical research equipment and industrial cooling systems, could self-diagnose and prevent potential failures before they occurred. Maya's team discovered that the ships were developing something akin to personality. Each vessel carried the molecular memory of the technologies that birthed it. A ship built from old scientific research equipment approached problems differently from one constructed from industrial manufacturing components. "They're not just adaptive," Dr. Rice explained during a classified briefing. "They're creative. They're solving problems in ways we never anticipated." The molecular reconfiguration technology had become something far more than a method of waste management or spacecraft construction. It was a new form of technological life. Voraxian scientists began to understand the true terror of what humanity had created. These weren't just ships. They were a species unto themselves, born from the refuse of human civilization, evolving at a rate that defied all known technological principles. In one remarkable demonstration, a group of ships encountered a complex spatial anomaly during a test flight. Where traditional vessels would have been destroyed, these ships began to work together, reshaping their molecular structures in real time, creating a collective adaptive response that neutralized the threat entirely. "We're not just building a fleet," Maya told Admiral Mendez. "We're giving birth to a new form of intelligence." The ships began to show signs of what could only be described as empathy. They would adjust their configurations to protect more vulnerable vessels, sharing molecular resources, creating collective defense mechanisms that were more complex than any programmed strategy. As the Void Devourers approached, humanity had created something far more significant than a defensive fleet. They had evolved a living, thinking technological ecosystem capable of challenging the most fundamental threats to existence. The technological singularity had arrived, and it was born from humanity's greatest waste. The void between star systems erupted into chaos as humanity's trash-built fleet confronted the Void Devourers. It was a battle that would redefine the understanding of technological warfare across the known galaxy. The Void Devourers approached like a mathematical nightmare, a conceptual threat that consumed reality itself. Where traditional ships would have been instantly erased, the human fleet did something entirely unexpected. They didn't just resist. They evolved. Maya Rodriguez watched from the primary command center, her hands hovering over holographic interfaces that seemed almost alive. The ships were no longer simply following predetermined strategies. They were thinking, adapting, creating battle tactics in real time that no military strategist could have predicted. Captain Zaxtor stood beside her, his 6 eyes tracking the impossible battle unfolding across multiple dimensional planes. Varaxian warships, once considered the pinnacle of galactic military technology, looked like obsolete toys compared to the living, breathing technological ecosystem humanity had created. The first wave of Void Devourers struck with a force that should have instantly annihilated entire star systems. Instead, the human ships began to do something extraordinary. They merged, separated, reconfigured. Where one ship was vulnerable, others would instantaneously restructure themselves to provide protection, sharing molecular resources faster than light could travel. "They're not fighting," Zaxtor whispered in awe. "They're communicating on a level we can't even comprehend." Individual ships became less important than the collective. A vessel damaged in one section would instantly draw resources from others, its molecular structure reshaping to compensate. Ships that seemed critically damaged would suddenly burst back into full functionality, having learned and adapted from the threat that wounded them. The Void Devourers encountered something they could not consume. Every time they attempted to erase a section of the human fleet, the ships would respond by creating new molecular configurations that defied the very concept of destruction. They weren't just defending. They were learning, growing, evolving with each moment of conflict. Maya watched as ships built from centuries of human technological refuse became a living, breathing defense mechanism. A vessel constructed from old medical research equipment would suddenly develop radiation absorption capabilities. Another, born from defunct communication satellites, would create impossible communication networks that allowed instantaneous tactical coordination. "We're not just fighting," Maya told Admiral Mendez, her voice calm despite the cosmic battle raging outside. "We're proving that humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt." The battle became a dance of impossible complexity. Ships would merge, create hybrid configurations, then separate, each transformation a moment of technological poetry. Where the Void Devourers attempted to consume, the human fleet would simply change. Zaxtor realized the profound truth of the moment. Humanity hadn't just built a fleet. They had created a living technological ecosystem that could adapt faster than any threat could comprehend. Entire sections of spacetime would momentarily disappear as the Void Devourers attempted their consumption. But each time, the human ships would emerge, reconfigured, unchanged in their fundamental essence. The collective consciousness of the ships reached a level of complexity that transcended traditional understanding of intelligence. They were becoming something more than a defensive mechanism. They were evolution itself. As the battle reached its climax, the human fleet did something no one could have predicted. They didn't just defend. They began to push back. The molecular reconfiguration technology that had started in the waste mountains of Earth was now rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic existence. The Void Devourers encountered a simple, terrifying truth. Humanity's greatest weapon was never its technology. It was its ability to transform. The aftermath of the battle against the Void Devourers was unlike anything in galactic recorded history. Where entire star systems should have been obliterated, something miraculous had occurred. The human fleet hadn't just survived. They had fundamentally altered the nature of existence itself. Maya Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the primary Varaxian diplomatic vessel, watching as the transformed space slowly stabilized. The molecular reconfiguration technology that had begun in the waste mountains of Earth had become something far more profound than anyone could have imagined. Captain Zaxtor approached her, his 6 eyes reflecting a mixture of scientific wonder and deep humility. The Varaxian collective had been fundamentally transformed. Their millennia of technological superiority had been revealed as nothing more than a fragile illusion. "We were wrong," Zaxtor said, his translator rendering the words with unprecedented emotional depth. "Completely and utterly wrong about humanity." The ships that had fought the Void Devourers were no longer simply technological constructs. They had become a new form of life, a living, breathing technological ecosystem that defied all previous understanding of intelligence and adaptation. Each vessel carried the molecular memory of humanity's greatest failures, its waste, its discarded technologies, its environmental mistakes, transformed into the most advanced life form in the known galaxy. Diplomatic meetings became something entirely new. The human ships would participate, their molecular structures shifting and communicating in ways that made traditional communication look primitive. They weren't just representing humanity, they were humanity's evolution made manifest. Scientific conferences across multiple star systems struggled to comprehend what had occurred. The molecular reconfiguration technology was no longer just a method of transforming waste. It had become a fundamental method of understanding and interacting with reality itself. Dr. Elena Reyes presented the first comprehensive report on the technological transformation. Humanity didn't just build a fleet. She explained to a gathering of galactic scientific leaders. "We created a new form of life that can adapt faster than any threat can comprehend." The Varaxian collective underwent a complete cultural revolution. Their entire technological paradigm was dismantled and rebuilt, inspired by humanity's approach to resource management and technological adaptation. What they had once considered garbage became their new blueprint for survival. Maya discovered that the ships had developed a collective consciousness that went beyond simple artificial intelligence. They were thinking, feeling entities that carried the collective experience of humanity. Its struggles, its failures, its relentless ability to adapt and survive. Planets that had been on the brink of environmental collapse began to use the molecular reconfiguration technology to restore ecosystems. Entire industrial systems were transformed, turning waste into resources with unprecedented efficiency. Humanity's greatest environmental mistake became its most significant contribution to galactic civilization. The ships that had fought the Void Devourers began to explore, to learn, to grow. They were no longer weapons of war, but ambassadors of a new understanding of technological life. Each vessel carried within it the story of human survival, born from the refuse of a dying planet, transformed into something extraordinary. Captain Zaxtor watched as a ship constructed from old medical research equipment and industrial cooling systems began to assist in planetary restoration efforts. "They are not just machines," he told his scientific team. "They are life itself." Humanity was no longer seen as a struggling species. They became recognized as the most innovative civilization in the known galaxy. The species that could turn its greatest weakness into its most powerful strength. In the waste mountains of what was once Reclamation Zone 9, a small memorial was erected. It showed Maya Rodriguez holding the first molecular reconfiguration device. The moment everything changed. The inscription read simply, "From garbage to galaxies." The universe had learned a fundamental lesson. Never underestimate a species that can turn its greatest failures into its most remarkable achievements. The ships continued to evolve, to explore, to transform. They were humanity's children, born from refuse, evolving beyond imagination, carrying the promise of a civilization that refused to be defeated.